Hi, welcome to the Also Called podcast, where we're asking hard questions about our place in this hectic world.
Join us as we dig into the truth about who God is, possibly discovering that we are also called.
So is there anything that you want to cover that you didn't really have an opportunity to? Because like you mentioned, we only had so much space for writing our chapter.
I don't want people to look over that she didn't do it alone. She did. She trusted and had to make decisions on her own in a lot of ways. And she had to choose for herself what she had to believe. Like that is something that only you can do as a person. The ability to do that and get past your fears and anxieties about things is to take actions on the trust. Like the obedience and trust kind of go hand in hand. I think we touch on that a little bit in the chapter. Like the obedience is the action on the trust that you have to have in the faith. That is something that is for you, but the encouragement we need is also from the people around us. And not just anyone. We're surrounded by everyone and also feel isolated. That's what made the Instagram post so fitting for this story of like the fictional part, right? Like we are more connected and more isolated at the same time than we have ever been before. That was Mary's case in her whole journey. You know, there was something she was keeping close to the chest that she knew not everyone would understand. And as more and more came out, she can be more out there with it. But she stayed true to who she was and who God was. But just there was a few trusted people all along the way that God had for her. What I would want people to get from her story is to seek that and to see that. I feel like in our society, we put people on pedestals like, look how great this person did, or look at the great things they did. And they forget that it took a village to do that. It doesn't need to be a whole glam squad of people. It just, man, you just need like that one good person. We say it in our house a lot, like, and when we've done ministry, Jesus had 12. He helped millions, but he had 12. And then in that he had 3, and in that he had 1. And then he had his alone time. And I was like, that is such an amazing model of what we can strive for, because we could only take in so much opinions anyway, true opinions. Mary demonstrated that in her life as well. Like she had Elizabeth and she had Joseph. And in that time where she lost Joseph and from the losing him when he was 12, the wedding miracle, like she lost her husband at that point, but she had the respect of people to listen to what she would say, which is a long way from being shamed and shunned. There was someone in that season that was with her to help her get back on her feet and make sure she was who she was supposed to be. That doesn't happen by herself.
Yeah, I love that. And you touched on something that is kind of in the heart of why we have this Also Called podcast, is because the access to information isn't truth. What we see on social media, we have constant interaction, but that's not really connection. So yeah, I love that you touched on one of the core things that we want to address. We want to build that safe space so that people can ask those hard questions and have a true connection. But yeah, that's what I love too about what you really brought to the forefront in your chapter is the community that she had in each season, being surrounded. And I, for one, can attest to different periods of my life where God placed someone in my life for a specific season that I was going to be walking into, and him preparing me for that. And also the sad thing is those people who are so instrumental in that season of your life won't necessarily be walking with you into the following season. And you mentioned Joseph died at some point between when Jesus was 12 and then when he was around 30. So Joseph didn't walk with her in that new season. So there's a grieving process that we will have as well when someone is so important in our life and then they're not going to be walking with us. But the things that we learned with them and through that relationship, we carry on.
You know, we have to learn to let go of those changes. And can it just be when that person's no longer in our life, whether it's because a death or a parting of a ways because of disagreement, honoring what they were to you in that season and what they brought to your life and how you're different because of that. I love that. That's a great thought.
Spiritual maturity differences. It doesn't mean that was a wasted season. Like you needed that to get to where you were. And now you have to go to the next person. If she didn't keep continuing, then Mary Magdalene wouldn't have had someone to grasp onto and bond with while she was following. I mean, Mary Magdalene would have totally done it anyway, but it helps to have that bond and someone there to do that with. And we're just wired that way. And I think as females specifically, we were wired to take care of Adam, like the take care of man. That's why we are so in tune with behaviors and, ooh, that tone was a little, different. Like we're so in tune to that. We can use that for evil, like be one of the mean girls, or we can use that to speak life and take care of and pull potential out of people and continue the discipling process along your life. And it's just, Mary, just such a good example of how to do that and with grace and strength. And so it was very inspiring to write and read and learn so much about her. For me, as someone who prided themselves on being the against stereotype of all the things I would never want to do, man, God is a God of vulnerability and love. And I think I used to see that as something I didn't want to do because of the whole stereotypes of like, well, girls are just emotional and they just cry all the time and they're so sensitive. And I think I just kind of made myself numb to a lot of that as I grew up. I was just like, I'm just not going to be that person. Like, I'm not going to be that kind of female. But as I've gotten older and even seeing the story of Mary and the journey, the strength in the vulnerability and the strength and power that love actually like does conquer all. It's a lot of different levels of love, a lot of different kinds, but building bridges versus tearing, like burning bridges, the power of forgiveness doesn't and healing, it's not about them changing to have you heal. It's about not giving that power. Jesus died and for all of that and conquered all of that for us to live free, but we can't live free if we're holding on to that bitterness and unforgiveness. And Mary had a lot of opportunity to have bitterness and hatred and unforgiveness really detour her mission from God. Good old mama bear stuff that no one would judge her for, like in our society, but she chose love, forgiveness, and just that quiet confidence of she's not giving that power and she's gonna stick on course and find the people that are going to champion that with her and encourage her. You're going to get what you seek. And if you're seeking for a reason to hate and to be isolated and have that be your community, you're going to find people for that because that's what our world is. And that's why Jesus came to die. But if you're seeking those who are speaking life, who are wanting to come join you arm in arm, build the bridges, do the crazy God dream and crazy mission, there are all those people too. And I think as females, we want to do it like all the men, and we just forget the power we have of being female. And just, God sees us and he values us, which is the point of this whole book. Mary saw the other women and saw them and valued them along her journey.
Going back to the God piece, we have to see that he provides the community and not disdain the small beginnings of, well, it's not what I thought it would look like. They're not my type. They're not my vibe or, whatever. Because I look at a lot of the most important relationships that I have in my life, and it would have been easily dismissed or easily judged them as being something and not having given it the time to grow the relationship. And the same vice versa. I think there's a lot of assumptions about who I am, but God is so gracious that he gives us the people that we're going to need in our lives in certain seasons. And some we're blessed to be 20 years down the road into the relationship and still friends, even though we are as different as night and day. But again, I love that you recognize that it's God who provides that community. And it may be different than what we think, but it becomes important to us and it shapes us as much as we shape it. And then I think the other thing that I love that you covered was just his faithfulness to recognize he put a big ask on her. I mean, a really big ask. And there were a lot of consequences of that ask. And he was so faithful in the Son of Man part of who Jesus is to have this child walk her through being his mother. And he was faithful in that. He was faithful in bringing her community. He was faithful in just getting her to the next step. So I just really think about in Mary's story, how much of it was even her and how much of it was God already providing the need to get so that she could get to the next scene, the next journey, the next, situation with Jesus, and how much he does that for us. I know in this project it's been overwhelming and I didn't know how to do 75% of it, but I just fell my way forward because God provided someone who, oh, I know how to do that. I know how to edit. I know how to turn that document into a 300 DPI for your publishing, and he provided that whole way, and he's so faithful to do that. So I love that you recognize that when you were writing this chapter about who he is and what he does for all of us, not just the special people like Mary or Elizabeth. It's the everyday, every one of us that he does
Well,
that
and I think that's the point too. All of these people were ordinary people. We make them extraordinary, but they're ordinary. And that's what I hope people, when they read our book, is that these are ordinary women going through ordinary problems. And they took that independent, stubborn streak that we all love about ourselves, and they just like put blinders on like a racehorse and just put it to God and just took that stubbornness and used it for good. We are all ordinary. Or we can sing it as we are all extraordinary because we're all made in the image of God, right? The world tells us we're ordinary.
what we covered in church yesterday, because Katrina and I go to the same church. The C.S. Lewis quote is, "You have never met a mere mortal."
Mhm.
Every single one of us is a being created in the image of God with a calling, with a purpose.
And we have what Mary and Elizabeth have. Like once we accept Jesus in our heart, we have that spirit in us helping us along the way. Sometimes hour by hour or minute by minute, even sometimes. And sometimes it's like once a day, or whatnot, depending on our spiritual strength of the day. But we have what they have. And I think people either forget or they're just not taught it in that way. And they just think, oh, I can't do that. I'm not strong enough. Like, that's the whole point. I mean, we're not strong enough. And I think that was what I learned about God in this process. That's where the strength and the vulnerability and the love and to be able to forgive comes in. He just outlines that so beautifully with her. And she was a mom to her own other son, too. I can't imagine the mental game of like, I have the son of man, but I have mine. How, like, to balance and not compare and all of that stuff. I mean, so like there's a lot of anxiety in her life that she probably had to go and give every minute of every day.
Right, sibling rivalry. I mean, when you're
I
small,
mean,
like you're the son of God, and we love you too.
right.
So, Katrina, looking at Mary's life and looking at what is the definition of a disciple, is she a disciple? And if you say yes, what is it in her that qualifies her?
She is absolutely a disciple. A disciple of Christ is someone who believes in who he is, who trusts and who follows through on not just what he's called us to and how to act, but the going and making of other disciples, like I don't want to say multiplication of yourself, but kind of like using God multiplication. And she took every little experience. Not only did I give her a community to help her, but she helped someone else in every single one of those times. Like she is with someone in it. Like she was always there. And that doesn't happen on accident. That is something that is intentional. And she is respected. And when we see her at the Pentecost moment, it says all the disciples, including, Mary and the other women, she's named. I just love that for her and love that for all of us, that we overcomplicate discipleship. Like, I was like, hey, you have to do this Bible study, you have to do this checklist. It's almost that Pharisee spirit of you got to do this, 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 and this. But discipleship is a heart issue of intentional choices to take whatever is happening in your life and showing and giving the God glory still over it, in the victories, and helping someone else in their mess so that they can see the glories in theirs. And then doing it in a way that they will share it with someone else. And Mary is like the initial stone throw of a lot of that in a lot of women. A lot of the other women in this book, some women in the book, were ripples of her discipleship. And I think that's super exciting. Absolutely. She is a disciple.
I love that you say, giving God the glory for the victories in our circumstances. And part of discipleship is doing that in relationship with others, because without that relationship, we can't, you mentioned iron sharpens iron. You can't really correct a brother and sister in Christ unless you have a relationship with them, because it's received as judgment and criticism. So I love that part of discipleship is that relationship.
So, how, Katrina, do you see her story applying to our audience? And what is a practical takeaway?
One of the biggest takeaways I got was her faithfulness and trust and the community aspect. In any season of your life, if you can focus on trusting God, there will be seasons it might feel like you and God against the world, but He will always provide at least one person to help you through that. Now, we have to be open to seek that and willing to take it from that person. And like you said, Mia, like that might not be someone we thought it would be or that we want it to be, maybe even in some ways. If the person hearing this today is the high schooler whose mom is driving them insane because they know she's right, but they don't want to admit that. And so they don't want to act on it because that would be admitting their mom is right. Or someone else, like, please, with everything in my heart, hear me that their guidance is there for love. If you don't want to do them, find someone who is echoing the things that you know are right, because that will change the trajectory of your life. Our society says to like go and make these dumb choices and it's okay and this is the time to do it. I was like, but even though God will forgive that, we remember that and it affects mind and our self-worth. So with Mary doing it so young and trying to do all the right things and still having anxiety of everything coming against her, and it was still hard for her. I can't imagine if it was like all of these things that we did on purpose to experience life, to get our life back later, on track later, and then think, well, of course I'm not good enough because I've done X, Y, and Z. Or now I have to deal with X, Y, and Z because of this one mistake when I knew better. But I was afraid of what they would think of me, right? Or if you've already done that, if you've already done, if you're already dealing with whatever life circumstances are, then know that that's not the end. We have so many people in this book that have done all of the things, all of the things. There is no one in scripture that has done less than someone has in our world today. It has always been around, and God has still used people and has found a way for them to be part of a journey, part of Jesus's legacy and lineage, even because they chose faithfulness when it mattered and continued that path and found other people. That's what I would like. Community is so important. The right community is what is so important. High school is hard, college is hard, but in the end, it's just shaping who you want to become. So surround your people with who you want to become after those stages, and those stages will come sooner.
I would say another practical application of community is being aware of exactly what you're talking about, the kind of people that you want to surround yourself with. Where would you practically find them? And then being aware and testing, are they worthy your trust? I wouldn't say go into things blindly, being completely open and airing your dirty laundry because you need to talk through it. Testing relationships first. Are they worthy of that trust? I know I used to be a completely open book and then kind of got hurt a few times too many, but then I became closed off and I didn't like that either. So now it's like, where's that middle ground of, hey, I see we have some things in common. Is this a trustworthy relationship? And then recognizing, like when Katrina was writing the chapter, we had this discussion about this concept called a constellation of mentors or a constellation of relationships, as you have that intimate small circle. So think of Jesus with James, John, and Peter. And then he had the bigger circle of the 12, and then he had the even bigger circle of everybody else that were followers or disciples, but weren't intimate with him. And it being the same way. So you've got that to test, how much you trust the people, because not everybody is worthy of knowing everything about you. But then there's the second part of being poured into. So having people who are able, like Andrea said earlier, speaking truth into your life because they love you and they're for you and they have your best interest at heart. Who else are you pouring into? So it should, there's that analogy of the Dead Sea, not having anything flowing into it, so it's dead. And then you have the River Jordan that's constantly flowing and it's alive and it's active and it's got life in it. So having that constellation of mentors, of you being mentored and you mentoring, and then being aware of where in that circle someone should be positioned in your life. So I think that's a practical way to look at like building community in your life.
We used to tell our youth to have friends with layers. You have the friends that you can go to movies with because you really don't want to talk to them, you really don't want to listen to their advice, but you also don't want to be alone. So like great going to movie friends, like everything's dark, you're not talking during the movie, maybe go out for an ice cream, maybe not a full dinner. And then you have the going out to dinner friends, like great conversation, but maybe don't agree on other like extracurriculars, but like we all are for some good food, you're still an influencer maybe and not being influenced, so but you can still have friendship and stuff like that. And then there's the friends that you invite to your house and do life with.
And it's also okay to have Jesus and a therapist too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
100%. Mary is amazing. She is the first lioness of the lioness pride, taking care of everybody. I love that about her. She knew from a young age of how important God was to her, and God just saw her. He saw who she was and just pulled this strength from within her and her heart, and she just trusted so beautifully that he would just be there along the way. And that included a life of heartbreak, pain, moving around, like all the things that are hard for so many of us to cope with. Her own fears as a person, maybe relationships that are torn because of that decision. And just God just so beautifully not just took care of her, but gave her so much in return of all the other, we call them like our chosen family, the chosen family that she got to help to heal that hurt and to give 10 times fold what she lost. I hope that that's what people see. There are some things in our life that are just hard and horrible, but he has us, and he has us in ways we can't imagine, and that are so much better than anything we thought we were going to lose or have lost or think we would never attain. And it might not look like what we thought. And success isn't always what the American dream says it is. Success is having a loving friendship, a loving community that you can leave a legacy of Jesus to. That is what we are wired to do. And that's what she did so beautifully.
Today, I learned the importance of community, and I'm going to go forth and do a better job at keeping in touch with mine.
Yes, I've definitely learned faith over fear, and to trust that God not only is going to order my steps, but surrounds me with the people I need in each season.
So thank you so much, Katrina, for joining us today. We so appreciate your heart and all the research that you've done to bring Mary to life. Thank you for joining us, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on Mary of Nazareth. So drop us a line in the comments, or for a larger conversation, go on social media. All of our links are in the show notes below. Join us next time as we dive into the women disciples we explore in the book, The Other Disciples, with a woman who needed to learn the better thing, Martha of Bethany. And remember, stay curious
and keep seeking.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Also Called provides a space for honest conversations about the truth of who God is, who we are, and the relationships He wants us to have with Him, each other, the church, and ourselves. This episode was just the start of the conversation. Be sure to check the show notes for extra resources to go further. You can also find our social media sites to join the discussion. Don't miss our next chat by subscribing to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Also Called is part of Bible and Pop Culture, a crowd-funded nonprofit that allows us to provide our content to start great conversations for free. You can help us keep doing this by checking out BibleandPopCulture.com or AlsoCalled.org's Donate Subscribe buttons with a one-time gift, supporting us monthly, or sharing us with someone who might like the conversation. Thank you for being a part, and see you next conversation.